Hey, we got an amazing guest today, which, Richard, I don't know if you know this, but in 1982, you were on a show called Square Pegs with Devo. And my wife was on that same show, so it's kind of interesting. We'll show a bit of that, and I'm sure she'll kill me if I do that. But the gentleman we have today, guys, who here loves 80s music, guys?
If you love music, come on.
Everybody loves music. So this gentleman came from England. I don't know, he probably followed the Beatles over or whatever, but happens to be one of his favorite groups. But he went to every radio station in LA, and they all said, he said he'd work for free. He was just wanted to get into the business. And he finally went to this last radio station, and I'm sure he'll tell us which one it is, and the lady said, with a voice like that and an accent, you'll never make it in this business. So he tucked his tail and ran to Pasadena to a beautiful little radio station, and I think within 3 to 6 months, they were pretty much the biggest radio station in LA. So guys, nice big warm welcome to Mr. Richard Blade. How you doing, Richard?
Hey, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and man, it makes me shiver when you give my biography like that. It's so cool.
Well, tell us, what was the radio station that you went to that told you that you're never going to amount to anything?
94.7 KMET. Hooyah!
Hooyah!
And yeah, it was the program director of that, and she said to me, no, you will never work in this town with that accent. And it was so funny because 3 years later, KROQ was #1, and KMET was, I think, like 32nd in the market. Boy. KLOS had kicked their butt too. And they came to me and said, would I take over and do mornings for KMET and leave KROQ? And I said, no. They offered me quite a lot of money, and I wasn't making that much at KROQ. It just didn't feel right.
Right.
And sure enough, 2 months later, they changed format and became The Wave. And I think what they were trying to do was just put one in on KROQ and get rid of the morning show at KROQ, just to say, you screwed us, we'll screw you before we die. And they went off the air, and it's a shame because KMET had a great legacy. They were a great rock station in the 70s and had some amazing talent like Jim Ladd, who's on Sirius XM right now, and I loved listening to him. And that's one of the reasons I went there, but they had no niceness about their approach. They were like, you never work in this town. Well, guess what? I ran into that program director in 1986. I was doing the grand opening of the Red Onion in Beverly Hills, and they were buying time on KROQ, so I was there, and she came in. And she said, oh, great to see you again. You're doing well. And I said, yeah, what are you doing now? Wondering, she was working at program director in San Francisco or something like that. She said, oh, I'm a secretary down the street. I just got off work. And I held back saying anything. I just said, well, good to see you again. But I felt like saying,
Oh, and by the way, don't trip on my star that's on the Hall of Walk of Fame, okay? Be careful when you're walking down there.
But she was really talented back in the day. I don't know why they did so badly against KLOS. I know why they did bad against us, because they wouldn't play any new wave music and they were behind the curve. But KLOS came from behind and just annihilated.
They also didn't have a morning voice that was smooth as good well-brewed tea, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's crucial.
Yeah, right? That's it. You've got to have good tea.
Brewed tea. Yeah. No, but you know what? That's normal. You get these people in management, and a lot of times they're the first ones to screw it up. They don't know a good thing when it walks through the door. You and I have got friends that have been very successful in this business, and they might have had the best talent in the world walk through their door and let them keep walking.
Mm-hmm.
It happens all the time.
Yeah, I remember when I was just a little kid, and my friend John Bennett said to me, I got this band, the Beatles. I just got their music. And we listened to She Loves You, and we listened to the other side of it. And he said, what do you think? I said, they're good, but they're no shadows. because Cliff Richard had a backing band called the Shadows, and I thought the Beatles would have maybe one or two songs, but they'd never last as long as Cliff Richard and the Shadows. So we all make mistakes.
Well, you know what? I heard you on an interview, and I think I don't believe you, because you told me your favorite band was the Beatles. And I'm going to say probably Depeche Mode's your favorite band.
My two favorite bands, Depeche Mode and the Beatles. I came to the Beatles a little later, about a year and a half later, I think with Penny Lane. My father was walking around the house singing Penny Lane. He loved that. And I thought, well, if Dad likes them that much, then they must be good. And Strawberry Fields, of course. And then I just fell in love with the Beatles. And I can listen to the Beatles anytime. And I can listen to Depeche Mode anytime. So those are my two favorites, without a doubt.
Well, it's kind of interesting you said that, Richard, because my parents and I had the same interest in the same music, but nowadays it's not really that way. The kids' music, it's past me, you know what I mean?
I agree with you 100%. One other band I love, it's actually from Southern California, and that's The Doors. Oh. I always love the music of The Doors, and quite often when I'm driving back from a gig late at night and I'm going through downtown LA, I'll put on LA Woman and think, and it just takes me right back. 40 years later, I can't believe sometimes I'm in Los Angeles and doing gigs and working and stuff like that. And you see the high rises and the lights and you hear Jim Morrison's voice. And it's just like, wow, just takes you right back to being a kid.
Richard, you've been doing this for a little while. You're pretty new to this, but you're known for causing a lot of trouble. And when I say that is, you remember when, I think was it Depeche Mode that you guys were opening up at the Beverly Center?
Oh yeah, that was a fun one. Howie Klein from Sire Records and I met in Burbank at the Sire Records headquarters inside of Warner Brothers in what we called the Ski Chalet, because it's got this pitched roof. And he said, I want to do something big with Depeche. We put them in the Rose Bowl 2 years ago, but Violator's coming out and we think it's going to be a huge album. We need to make a statement. And I said, okay, well, you could try an in-store. And he said, you think so? And he said it would have to be at least as big as Van Halen's at Tower Records, which attracted 5,000. I said, I think it will be at least that big. And he said, okay, let me start working on that. So he got together with the Warehouse at the Beverly Center for the launch of Violator. And we promoted it on KROQ. And it wasn't 5,000 people that showed up, it was 17,000 people. And it was 6 city blocks, the line. And it got to the point where the police closed down that whole area of the Beverly Center. And
that's a freaky center. It's it's
wild. It's busy. You got Melrose and everything going there.
It's a very busy intersection.
Yeah, and then they, before anything started, they issued a tactical alert, and they sent in officers on horseback and 2 squads of police helicopters. And at 8 o'clock, the doors opened at night for the in-store, and the people started filtering in. And the first 10, 15 minutes went really well. And then people began to realize that Depeche Mode were getting through maybe 3 or 4 people a minute at the most. And with 17,000 people in line, that would be at least 3 days. And then they started pushing forward. And that's when the chaos kind of started, and the security inside shut the doors. The police put the sirens on and said everyone must disperse. And then the plastic shields came out, and they looked like a Roman legion walking down. But fortunately, it was a KROQ crowd. It was new wave. So the kids were like, hey, okay, we're fine, we'll do what you say. So there was no fighting, nothing was broken, no window, not one window was smashed, nothing. 2 girls were taken to hospital, one fainted and one fell over, but fortunately neither were hurt. And Depeche came on the radio station the next 2 days to apologize and say how sorry they were. And then they asked if I would help them produce an album to give away to the listeners. And so I said, sure. And I got to go in the studio with Depeche Mode and do one side of the album, and Flood, their longtime producer, did the other. And it was called Depeche Mode Live at the Warehouse. And then they liked it so much it went national. It was great.
Isn't that the one that they gave away free?
Yeah, initially they gave it away free on cassette, and then they issued it on CD.
Right.
Yeah.
And they really wanted that to get to the fans that had shown up and didn't get to see a show or didn't get to meet Depeche Mode when the cops shut that all down.
Absolutely. They felt really, really bad about it. It wasn't like we're just doing a publicity stunt. They had no idea that Warner's wanted to make such a statement. Depeche just wanted to sign albums and say hi to the kids and everything like that. But
do their thing.
But there was just too many.
One of the crazy stories is the Led Zeppelin story. And they were turned away at the UK for Blondie, right?
Right.
Deborah Harry, right?
Yeah, they went, I think it was Clem Burke who told me that. The drummer of Blondie also drummed with the Ramones and recently with the Go-Go's, actually, when Gina Schott got hurt. And he said to me, it was cool drumming with the Go-Go's because I was the best looking guy in the band. But he said when they were playing and really taking off in the UK, and they'd never had a hit, never even been in the top 100 in America, but they had a series of number ones in England, and they were the hottest band around. And the guys from Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant and everyone, tried to get into the show and were turned away. And afterwards, the band Blondie found out about that, and they were so pissed because they wanted to get photographs and autographs with Led Zeppelin. But the bouncers didn't care. They were like, no, we're at capacity, can't come in.
I didn't know this, Richard, but you've written 7 books.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the one that just came out?
Yeah.
Unlocked interview.
Yeah, I started in 2017 with my autobiography, World in My Eyes, and I was talking to Billy Idol, and Billy had just written his as well, called Dancing with Myself, and I said, Billy, you're an author now. And he said, nah, not an author. Not an author until you write 2 books. So I thought...
I can see Billy saying that, too.
Yeah, I thought, I'll write another book. So I had a couple of screenplays I'd written that hadn't been produced, so I thought I'd use those as the backbone for a novel. And so I wrote SPQR, and it got well received. And then after that, I went and alternated between novels and nonfiction in the form of interviews. I'd done so many interviews with bands. And the first one was called the Lockdown Interviews. It was done during the pandemic, when instead of only getting 20 minutes with the band and you've got their manager standing behind the microphone going like this to his watch the whole time, during the lockdown, they had nowhere to go. Like with Boy George, I had 6 hours we hung out and did an interview. So I did that.
That's a little long to hang out with Boy George.
I know. I'm doing a gig with him next month as well. So I mean, he's one of the best interviews. He's so much fun. Then it was so well received and people loved it so much that I did a sequel to it and called the Unlocked Interviews. And it was after the lockdown finished and the bands went back out on the road. And that was the angle, talking to the groups about what it was like now to get back out there. So we had Roxy Music I was talking with about going out on their 50th anniversary tour, and Simon Le Bon about doing the Future Past tour because they had the new album. And then also during that tour found out they're going to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So what a year for them. And Blondie, as I mentioned, with Clem Burke, and then with Chris Stein and Debbie Harry. So that's the latest one, the Unlocked Interviews.
You know, I noticed you're a T-shirt guy like me, where I'm always wearing some funky T-shirt. But I saw you in an interview a while back, and one of my favorite bands of all times, these guys played at one of my music venues, The Reflex, and you were wearing their shirt.
They're playing at OC Tavern.
They're what?
They said they're playing at OC Tavern on Friday.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, we're going.
Reflex are a local band, and they are basically an 80s cover band, but they make it their own, and they're so good. And Greg, their front person, is fantastic. And I got them at one of the gigs I was doing once a year in Mexico called 80s in the Sands, which is now just called The Sands. And I said to the producer of that, Steve, I said, you should try him. So he's like, oh, he's from Detroit. He goes, well, you got these bands on the East Coast. I said, just try the Reflex. And he tried them, and they've been back every single year since. And they're so, so good. If you get a chance, the Reflex, you will love them.
You know, Richard, I just had Matt Mauser on from the Tijuana Dogs, and he was talking about the Reflex also, how much he loves their music. You know, you guys got to go see those guys. They're a lot of fun, a lot of energy.
They are.
You know, that's what 80s music was. Mm-hmm. Really.
Yeah, the lead singer, Greg, it's like he's got springs in his shoes. He bounces on stage the whole time. It's great.